You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 24, part 1. This podcast is dedicated to circus. It's a place for professionals to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to get a sneak peek into this amazing world. Hey friends, fans, and enemies, I'm Shannon McKenna, and I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. Have you noticed there are some pretty cool stickers popping up here and there in circus studios around the world with the Artist Athlete logo wearing super cool headphones? If you see a sticker like this on a water bottle or a child's forehead, it means that someone, somewhere in the vicinity, is a Patreon of the Artist Athlete podcast. What's a Patreon? It's someone who gives money each month to ensure the continual success of the Artist Athlete podcast. Want to become one? Go to patreon.com/theartistathlete and sign up. People who give $5 a month or more get all of the episodes early, behind-the-scenes special content, and a cool sticker. Again, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. My guest today is Steve Smith. Steve began as a clown with Ringling Bros and Barnum and Bailey Circus, and served as the Goodwill Ambassador. He was Dean of the Ringling Clown College for 10 years, and also served as the director for the 123rd edition of The Greatest Show on Earth. He is a 5-time Emmy Award winner for his work in children's television and was inducted into the Clown Hall of Fame in 1993. Steve worked as a director and creative consultant for clients including Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines, McDonald's, Walt Disney World, Chuck Jones Film Productions, and many off-Broadway theater, cabaret, theme park, and film projects. He now serves as the creative director at the San Francisco Circus Center. Here's part 1 of my interview with Steve Smith. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Steve Smith.
I'm glad to be here.
Yay. The pleasure is always all mine. Can you tell the listeners at home a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay. Well, currently I serve as the creative director here at Circus Center, San Francisco. And my duties include arranging for artist and residency programs when we have the time and space to do so. And my biggest task was starting a cabaret, a circus cabaret. We're getting ready to launch our 4th season. We've done 21 original shows so far, featuring over 150 local circus, variety, and dance artists, as well as artists from beyond.
Do you remember your first time on stage?
Yes, in 9th grade, I was in a school assembly program.
Where did you go to school?
I grew up in Zanesville, Ohio.
Zanesville, Ohio?
Yes, a small town in southeastern Ohio. Great place to grow up. Wouldn't want to live there, but it's a great place to grow up.
Sure.
And it afforded me the ability to just be who I was, because everybody knew your business. Today that would probably be called stalking or harassment, but we did have a town gossip. Her name was Mabel Adams, and she had 2 police scanners, and we always loved going to her house because there was always noise going on. And she knew if your house was on fire before you would. But it was also seemingly innocent in those days. But I never was a reserved kid. My older brother was the brainiac of the family, and he went on to be a college professor. My younger brother also enjoyed books and became a librarian. I was the lone holdout as far as show business. But in that school assembly in 9th grade, I got my first laugh. And I'll never forget it because this wave of laughter, and to me, of course, it's grown like a fish story now. You know, the laugh was so big and so long, I waited a week and a half before. It was transformative. I got tingly all over, and I thought, oh my God, I want to do that again. So I knew then that I wanted to be in show business. In what way? I had no idea. I had never seen a circus, had rarely seen a live show, but that's when I knew.
So what were the steps you took to get on stage again?
Okay, so from 9th grade you go into into high school. And so I joined the Thespian Club.
The Thespian Society,
yes. And became president of that club when I was a senior in high school. But I was also in the band.
Okay.
And I have to give a nod to our band director, because again, he allowed my sense of humor to come out. In the marching band, you learned a new routine, field routine, every week. What great discipline. Years later, when I had to learn lines and learn all the materials that I did when I was advancing for Ringling Brothers, being in the marching band was a discipline that I enjoyed. Learning new music and new patterns on the field to make all the different shapes that marching bands used to do.
And every week you had to do a new pattern.
Every week. So you would go to band camp in the summer for a week to learn the first two formations. And then every week after the games, you would learn a new formation and a new set of charts and do it that Friday night, either at a home game or an away game. So you would take the buses, and I was, already getting used to life on the road.
What instrument did you play?
Drums.
Oh, nice.
Percussionist. And which also lent to comedic timing. I loved Warner Brothers cartoons. To this day, it's hard for me to articulate what it was about them, except it touched something in me when I watched, especially the Roadrunner cartoons, because of the way it was scored musically. I could count the beats physically and try to reproduce some of the bits, comic bits that I would see in those cartoons. Not knowing that years later I would meet the creator of those cartoons and work alongside of him. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. So the marching band and the Thespian Club taught me these disciplines about performance, but where to do it, and especially in a small town in Ohio. I guess I drifted more towards live performance because of that laugh that you don't get in film. I needed that feedback and instantaneous gratification. So I tried out for every play that I could, rarely got cast, but I didn't mind working backstage, still don't. I was just happy to be a part of that world. I felt accepted. So when I graduated high school, I thought, I want to be in vaudeville. There's no more vaudeville to be in. So I applied to Ohio University and enrolled in their professional actor training program. This is 1969, 1970 came along. The Vietnam War was raging. There were demonstrations and what we used to call moratoriums on our campus every single day. They weren't always peaceful. There was a lot of rolling of the police cars and storefronts being broken into. One hideous occasion in Kent State, which was a school not too far from us, the idiot governor of the time in Ohio allowed the National Guard to use live ammunition. Several students were killed during one of these demonstrations. I think we were 90 miles from Kent, there was an announcement on our school PA system, if you can believe that we had to be off campus in 24 hours. Athens, Ohio is in a small cutoff community. At the time, only 2-lane roads came into it. Undergraduate population was 25,000. We had 24 hours to get off campus. So parents racing into Athens, Ohio, us watching as the National Guard with tanks rolling into little Athens, Ohio, every 12 feet along the main street, armed. And I'm thinking, the world is changing. And my world certainly was, because in the middle of all that, I got clipped in the head with a tear gas canister. Went to the healthcare center, and there, on the magazine rack, was a Life magazine cover story about Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey's Clown College. There's a picture of a man, his name was Nat Litt, and he was half in clown makeup and half human. And I grabbed that magazine. The clouds had parted, the angels came out, the trumpets roared. I knew in that moment that was going to be part of my destiny. I didn't know anything about circus clowning, but when I read that they taught classes in slaps, falls, slipping on banana peels, I thought, this is heaven. I have to go there. So I called the dean at the time, Mr. Bill Valentine.
So you were sitting in the healthcare center.
Yes.
You had this magazine in your hand.
Riots going on outside. Okay, serious stuff, Vietnam War, and here's this little moron going, pies and bananas and stuff. I want to do that. Because I figured it couldn't be any more absurd than what was happening outside our door in Little Athens, Ohio. But I also knew that it was my calling. I felt not only drawn to it, but compelled to want to be a part of it. And so, our campus shut down. Off we went, and I applied to Clown College and was accepted. No audition. How odd.
Really? No audition for Ringling Brothers Clown College.
No, but
you could
I
just show up
into the school. Well, you had to go through the application process. Was interesting. You would not be allowed to ask these questions today. They were trying to find out about you.
Okay.
So it didn't really care about your grade point average. It asked questions like, when was the last time you cried? Why? What's your favorite book? What movie would you see 3 times again? And if you answered honestly, you had a much better chance of getting it. I know this now. I didn't know it then. But some people would fill it out as a joke, and then those people were not accepted into the program. It was a very interesting application.
That speaks so much to, I think, the vulnerability that is required in clowning, don't you think?
That's the perfect word, because you have to, tear down all of the barriers that we've put up as people, not only to allow people in, but to let what you're feeling out. And those who are willing to be vulnerable move among mysteries, and I love that mysterious part of what we do, because it's not always easy
it's very hard
to explain it. And if you ask somebody what's funny, well, you'll get 100 different answers, but it really comes down to what you think is funny and trusting your sense of humor. And that's usually the right path. It doesn't always mean you'll get a laugh, but it is the right beginning, because it comes from an honest place.
So you went to clown college.
So I went to clown college.
And where was clown college?
So at the time, it was in Venice, Florida, which is where Ringling had established their winter quarters, in a big old barn of a building, not climate controlled. And it was, at that time, 8.5 weeks intensive. We started at 8 in the morning, went till 10 at night, and had classes in arena choreography, clown makeup, props, wardrobe, slaps and falls, classic entrees, and had a faculty.
What's a classic entree?
So, yes, it sounds like a meal, doesn't it?
It does. It's also cuisine.
Look at this, it's a fresh filet. These were European trio pieces or duo pieces that were classics in the clown repertoire. And so we would watch film. It's obviously no videotape yet, of these wonderful old circus acts and circus acrobats, like Poodle's Hannaford. We would watch those comic acts and see, how do you get yourself into such a physical condition that you can go be a bareback rider, but then do all of this great comedy at the same time. So we would do that, and then we would try to replicate what we had learned visually.
I get this sense in clowning. I know very little about it, but I get this sense that there are bits that are kind of classically passed down.
Yeah, that's true. Most of our history is oral. We pass the stories down. Not a whole lot of it is written down. Some, not a whole lot. Because even the most classic piece of material will change its form and its content when it is hung on your frame. In other words, when you do it, it's going to be much different than the way I do it. The way it should be. Mm-hmm. Otherwise it would be sending the clones. We'd have to call Sondheim and change the lyrics of the song. But tradition is handed down, as much of circus is. But clowning is kind of a secret world in a way. Magicians are kind of the same way. We don't want everybody to know how all the tricks are done. And even when you watch magicians reveal tricks, to me it does not ruin the magic of it. When I watch a true professional create magic, I'm with them and I believe them in the moment, I can suspend my disbelief and still hold on to that moment of wonder. That's part of our naivete that we have to hold on to. It does not make us infantile. It does not make us moronic. It makes us capable of wonder. And at least for me, I need to hold on to that.
So what was your favorite class in clown college?
Well, I would have to slaps and falls, learning how to walk into a door, fall down a flight of stairs without breaking an arm or anything.
Right,
How to literally slip on a banana peel. What was the technique involved? How did you align your body? And believe it or not, it was some of the dance classes that we took that lent to the flexibility and knowledge of this instrument known as your body. And again, the musical structure, and because I was a drummer, I began to learn how to score my script, my routines. I would score it musically, musical staff paper, and the rule of 3, the setup, the build, and the blow off, and it all had a tempo that I began to understand just intuitively. And I don't know if any of that makes any sense to you, but
no, that makes total sense. Yeah, absolutely.
That's how it worked, and that therefore became my favorite, because anytime we put on any piece of music, I had grown up watching Warner Brothers, so classical music had a different frame of reference for me when kill the wild.
Yeah, I was just about to.
Yes.
The ring cycle was a totally different
reverence for classical music than maybe Wagner or anybody else intended when they wrote the pieces. But.
That's so funny. So after clown college, did you get on the road with Ringling?
So the reason that clown college existed was to recruit young men and women who were not only interested in physical comedy, but could show the endurance through the training program, the life on the road. Out of a class, my class had about 40 students. About a third of us got performance contracts for either the red unit or the blue unit, 2 traveling units, completely full circuses, and then traveling by train across the country. So in 1971, in the Clown College, signed that contract, went into rehearsals that December, and hit the road right after New Year's of 72. And for 11 months, my home was in a circus train, doing 2 shows a day, 3 on Saturday, 6 days a week. And for that 11 months, long tour, for over 500 shows.
Wow.
I loved it.
Wow.
Loved it.
500 shows.
You know, you want to get good at something, repetition. Rehearse. Well, you got to rehearse basically in front of a live audience that you didn't have to work to get in the seats. They had a marketing department who did all that. Your task was to come in and be funny. Holy crap. Where else do you find a gig like that?
Yeah.
Regardless.
Do clowns ever bomb? Like,
Oh my God,
like
yes.
comedians talk about bombing, right?
Oh,
when they
Lord.
do stand-up, do clowns bomb?
Oh my! So there's a joke about who's out there tonight, and you would say the Rose family. What does that mean? Mr. and Mrs. Rose, rows and rows of empty seats, or rows and rows of quiet people, because you suck, basically. You have to understand that Ringling at the time was indoors, no more big top. So we were playing arenas. Well, the smallest arenas would seat 5,000 to 10,000 people, and the biggest was the Superdome, which could seat 75 to 90,000 people. So your physical self had to be as big as you could make it, and yet still believable, and still tied to character and truth, and oh my goodness, which is why it's very easy to criticize that style of clowning, but those were the venues we played. So if you wanted to reach your audience, first row people, but also the lady in the 4th balcony.
Yeah.
But bombing, oh my gosh, yes. However, I think many comedians would say the same, whether physical or verbal. That's when you really learn lessons, when you bomb. Because when you succeed, it gives you confidence, but that confidence can quickly turn to cockiness. And I killed him tonight. Yeah, you killed him tonight. That's why they're so quiet tonight. You killed him last night. The lessons I learned from failing, if you want to call it that, falling flat on my face.
And not in a funny way.
And not in a funny way. First, of course, there's that you pull your hair out. And it teaches you a bigger lesson. Respect for your audience, respect for your craft, respect for one another, and respect for yourself. When you start taking yourself too seriously as the artiste and expecting the audience to come along with that on that ride, I think you've crossed a big line. Most audience members in this country, much different in Europe, but especially in this country, have not grown up with circus as an art form, or being treated as an art form. Much more casual kind of an audience here. People stuffing their face full of cotton candy and peanuts and beer, and kids barfing, and you would not really find that at Circus Roncalli or Skiddy. So the lesson for me was learning how to earn that respect each and every day, in each and every show, and never taking for granted that people had paid money to come in, and they did not care what happened to you backstage. They don't care, nor should they, about any of that. We've invited them in for magic. Our job is to give them magic.
That's so good. That's so good.
Those are the lessons. I know, but it didn't come right away.
Yeah, sure.
I was young and cocky and thought I knew, everything that was ever known.
I almost feel like you have to be young and cocky. You have to think you're awesome even if you're not.
How else could you do it?
Exactly.
How could you even step off the diving board, or not overconfidence, but a belief in your ability to do the thing in front of you. When you hear athletes talk about envisioning what they're going to do right before they do it, same thing. In acting school, we always called it an actor prepares, and you need that first, however long it takes you, to just do your breathing exercises and think through your opening beats, to totally focus in on what I'm about to do in the place I'm about to do it, not trying to recreate the show I did last night or thinking ahead to the next one. This show right now, what do I know about this audience and me? And I forget where the hell we were going with this.
I don't know. This happens to me all the time when I go interviews. But it does introduce my next question, which is, so you went on Ringling.
Yes.
And then I was reading your biography. You went to DePaul.
I was lucky enough to have as one of my instructors, Otto Griebler, who by the time I had met him, had lost his voice to cancer, so he mimed everything, on stage and off stage. I watched this man of an age do the blow off to the come in, the last gag in the 20 minutes of the warm up that the clowns used to do before the show would begin. He had the last 5 minutes, and he would walk out in tattered clothing with 2 pie tins, and he would stand on the front track and clang those pie plates together until the audience started to applaud. He'd gauge it in his mind and That's not good enough. He'd cross to the back track and do the same thing, back and forth. He would captivate. He compelled them to look at him and watch what he was doing and then play with him. So he would get the entire arena clapping in rhythms that he would get going. 10,000 people, he would warm them up. Wow. So that when the ringmaster blew that whistle, the audience ready to go, all in the same place mentally. I thought, okay, I don't know how to do that. So another great instructor I had, Sigfrido Aguilar, mime teacher during my clown college, and had started a school in Mexico and invited me to come. So I did. So I left Ringling, went to Mexico, studied mime, toured throughout central Mexico, the language of clowns, because it is universal. Came back to the States at the end of '73 and called Irvin Feld, the president of Ringling, and saying, like he would care, I'm back. And he said, great kid, I want you to be my advanced clown. And I did not know what he was talking about, his advanced clown, but I came to learn because I took the job. I rarely said no to jobs. I don't know if anyone else is afflicted with that problem in show business, but I'm never sure when the next one's coming, so I would always say yes. And what it meant was, I spent the next 5 years off and on traveling in a motorhome, getting into a city about 2 weeks before the show would arrive, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, slap the grease paint on. A promoter would pick me up, we'd go do the morning radio programs, television programs, elementary schools, Kiwanis Club luncheons, all to promote the circus before I got to town. And I would stay until opening night, do my bit in the show, and then off to the next city. Again, a great learning ground. Talk about failing. Oh my, I knew nothing about performance in front of a camera. So I was still performing in arena style, huge, scaring the audience to death. You wonder why children have these phobias about clowns. It was probably my fault. On television, being very large, doesn't work. I learned how to modulate my performance energy for the venue that I was in. Great lesson to learn. And one of the shows I did was at the old Goodman School of Drama in Chicago, Illinois. And they said, if you ever think about leading the show, we'd love to have you come teach some master classes. And I said, well, what about if I just came as a student? So, well, we would waive your tuition if you would teach a course to first-year acting students. So anyway, that's what I did. Once again, ran away from the circus, and the home I chose this time was Chicago.
And your setup was you would teach...
I would teach
the first-year
acting students
clowning.
Right.
And in exchange...
They took all the credits from Ohio University and transferred them. And so in 1 year, I got my BFA in acting. And I have found that my acting work enhances my clowning work and vice versa. And it really is about being true and authentic to the material. If it's your clown character, well, be true and authentic to that. Just because it doesn't come from a book that has a Russian name on it doesn't mean it's not valid. We tend to poo-poo our own ability to recognize what's important in a script. A clown routine needs to be scripted, needs to be written out. But even if there's no dialogue, you need to what are your physical movements? Where are you going to be? How do you get there? What's your intention? Why do you want to get this pie? Or what is motivating you to do any of these things? And when you can score that and really understand the story, you'll tell the story better.
This podcast is brought to you by The Artist Athlete. Did you know that The Artist Athlete is more than just a podcast? It's a growing online resource for students of the aerial arts to deepen their journey to badassery by accessing techniques approved by physical therapists and master coaches in the industry. Our current spotlight is on the fundamentals of aerial alignment, a practical manual for hanging upside down. This online manual is a step-by-step guide. It is complete with photos, videos, and exercises that you can implement immediately to help you gain the strength and awareness you need for an aerial practice that promotes shoulder health and longevity and good posture upright, so you don't walk around like a gorilla. But don't just take my word for it. Here's circus physical therapist Dr. Jen Crane of Cirque Physio to tell you more.
The fundamentals of aerial alignment is an absolute must-have for every aerialist of every level. I can't even tell you how many shoulder injuries I treat that are a direct result of rushing past the basics in an attempt to get a trick too soon. In the manual, Shannon deconstructs the fundamentals, including the correct muscular engagement to safely arrive in these positions and the rationale for why it matters. Of course, in addition to all of these fabulous pearls of wisdom, the book is also ridiculously fun to read. It's been lovingly garnished with the Shannon humor we all know and love.
Thanks, Jen! Cirque Physio is also featured in the book to give scientific insight into why it all works. Pick up your copy today by going to theartistathlete.com and clicking e-manuals. Listeners of the podcast can get a 10% discount by typing in the offer code podcast at checkout. Again, that's theartistathlete.com, offer code podcast. Now, back to the show.
I actually score, I'm an aerialist, but I score my pieces as well.
Brilliant.
And I've never heard anybody else talk about it that way, because a lot of aerialists come from the dance world,
Yes.
and I don't know what I honestly don't understand. I was never a dancer, so I don't know.
Language.
But yeah. But I speak a very narrative language even in my movement.
And do you share that with anyone? Do you have a coach who you work with, who you share that scoring with? So there's a commonality of language?
No, I go to coaches pretty much for technical training, and then all of my own work is, I was Meisner based. I did 2 years with Vicky Hart. Brutal emotional training, So it's interesting to hear you speak of clowning with script analysis or that kind of into it.
I think when you're devising any kind of material, whether it's composition of an act in the air or a comedy routine on the floor, I don't know any other way to do it and stay on track. You can learn, here's where you go from A to B and you have to get from B to C. But if it's not connected, and it's usually the transitions that kill any piece, any presentation has to be glued together with a storyline. So it starts with a bit or a routine or an idea. But how do you incorporate that into a story? Well, keep it simple. That kind of brutal training, I think it depends on where you are in your growth as a human being, as an artist, whether you can take that kind of criticism for what it's really meant to do, which is to tear down the barriers, tear down the wall that we all have, the tricks of the trade that you use every time you come into the room.
Right.
That was really great in the 9th grade. Now you're here. In my brief exercises in directing, especially circus artists, it's usually best to start with a blank slate. Not how I've done it before, not how I would do it next week, but with this artist or this troupe in this time. So,
how do you know that you're doing that? Starting with a blank slate, I mean. How do you...
Well, that's a great question.
How can you be so honest with yourself to not fall back on your old...
You have got to have somebody who will call you on your crap. You have to, because it's too easy, at least for me, at this point in my life, I will step right back up on that podium and begin to pontificate. I believe in someone. And you just need somebody to go and take the air out of that sail to keep you real. So, in a way, the director needs a director.
I know, what a scary position to be in, where it's like you're the one, where the buck stops.
Yes, and as long as you're willing to say, I don't know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. And if I am saying something that is totally unintelligible to you, or if I'm saying something that's going to put you in danger in any way, you have to just stop me and say, that's a great idea in the movies, we don't do that here. Because I don't know everything about apparatus. When I first learned about Russian swings, I said, oh, that is so cool. And learning more about what death machine it can be, it's like, okay, I would use this, carefully, and love using it, love the artists and acrobats and athletes as artists who can take those concepts and bring them to life. But I have to rely on their expertise as well. It's more of a collaboration than anything else, and that's what directing should be, in my view.
I feel like we're skipping over large chunks of time, but I get a lot of people who ask, I want to be a director. I want to be a director of circus.
Yeah, what a responsibility. When we talk about, the death-defying acts, you should take that to heart. I've been privileged to work with so many artists over the years, and unfortunately have seen tragic accidents leading to death. Beautiful young people, beautiful old people who just in that one moment missed the wire. The motorcycle didn't quite hit the globe the right way. And there's absolutely nothing you can do to prepare yourself for that, other than to be conscious of it every single moment. Mm-hmm. And when you're devising and you're creating, understand when an artist says, I don't know, if you sense even for a moment that there's fear, understand what kind of fear it is. I don't care if you're 10 feet off the ground. You still break your neck when you fall. So come alongside and been pulled tight enough, the wire isn't taut. By God, stop. Just stop. I don't care if it's a tech rehearsal. I don't care if it's a preview. Stop. It's a human being, and we're going to get this right. Leading up to all of that is your preparation. And as a director, you better learn as much as you can about all the artists, and you better have seen them work live. You better understand their temperaments and their family lives, especially if it's going to be a long tour. You better work with the running crew of that show like they're your brothers and sisters. Stay up all night with them if you have to. Load ins and load outs, you be there. You understand how that equipment gets set. You understand how that apparatus works. You devise your own language. You have some kind of system of communicating to the floor director or whoever. Stop. I can't emphasize enough, that aspect of it. We haven't even gotten to now, let's delve into what the story is. Not only of the overall show, and maybe there isn't one, maybe it's a variety show. Fine, you have to have a story of your act. Directing circus is a lot about knowing the nuts and bolts, but it's more important to know the heart and soul of the people who are involved with this show. If you can prove yourself to the artists and the working people in whatever show you're doing, you stand a very good chance of getting a product at the end of all of that that you're all proud of. And it really has to be for everyone needs to be proud of the work. It can't just be a paycheck.
Right.
We all, go from gig to gig, and we wonder, I haven't got anything booked for December yet. That's the reality of the business. Making the choices of when to work and when not to work. I got lucky. I found something I love to do and am still enthusiastic about it. And enthusiasm, by the way, is one of my favorite traits of any human being. If you're enthusiastic about what you're doing, man, it's a joy to be around people who just love it and go, or can look you right in the eye and go, yeah, that's a great idea. I'm not doing that. Okay, well, as long as we understand each other, good, and move on.
As long as you're enthusiastically saying no.
And you're not pissing all over the parade.
Sure.
I'm way off into the weeds here. I wandered off, but the desire to direct, I think, comes from our desire to put an imprint on work we do love, and to be a part of it from that angle. Mainly because we've all worked with directors who at some point we've gone, really? That's your choice? I think that really, I wouldn't. I
feel like I could do this way better than What would you say is the differences between directing for theater and directing for circus?
My experience is that we deal a lot more with the emotional aspect of what we do and what we're trying to say in the theater. And that's not to discount doing it in the circus. But again, what is our venue? What is our medium? If we're directing a theatrical piece to be done in the round, it's very circus-like the way you approach the work. If it is a straight proscenium show or a small black box, you're not going for the spectacle of something. You're going for staying connected to every moment in that script. Exhausting. It's exhausting work. And sometimes it's not always pleasant. Not every play is a comedy. But from great tragedy comes great comedy and vice versa. In the circus, yes, you can have a storyline. When I directed the version of Ringling Bros that I directed, I had a cast of 140, lions and tigers and bears on I had children from 40 children in that show, so we decided to feature them. And David Larible was the clown, and we made him the Pied Piper. We had a story that was very unusual for a show that large. And the disagreements with the producer and myself were on the emotional tugs that we were laying into the show musically. But you have a lot more tricks up your sleeve when you have a huge show and a huge budget to work with. That show had an $11 million budget. We do a lot
That's
of that.
Quite nice.
Many nights in hotel rooms. This was, again, we started pre-production 18 months before we went into rehearsal because it sounds like a lot of money. But the show had at that time had to last for 2 years. Wardrobe and light, everything, and it all had to be boxed up and on the train, which means you'd better be in as peak performance mode as all those athletes who are doing what they're doing, because you need to give your full self to the wardrobe department and to the props department and to the road crew and to the running crew, and you can't be tired, and you can't be you can't get sick, and you can't. You
can't be a human being.
You really can't. You have to have this. I don't know what it is that kicks in. It's a marathon.
Right.
And you say, I have 9 weeks to do this. And somehow mentally you prep for that, and then you go and you don't stop. Into that 9 weeks and the show opens, there is a crash. There is a physical and mental. And so I just will be in bed for 2 days and unconscious of the world around me. But it doesn't make any difference whether I had 9 days or 9 weeks or 9 months. It's the same.
It's just part of the process.
This is what it's going to take, and my God, we're going to do when we get to the finish line, and it's all good. See ya. Boom.
I feel like we need a sound effect there.
Oh yeah, okay,
like a wah-wah.
Yeah, okay, yeah. 9 months later, we put up the show, and how are you feeling?
That's awesome. Man, when you're directing and when you're putting together like a show with an $11 million budget or something like this, you have a conception for a story, or when you're looking at individual acrobats or acrobatic acts, does that at all play into story? Or
Sure.
I mean, of course you need a juggler, of course you need an aerial act, of course you need this, but The particulars of that, how sensitive are you to those when you're looking at story?
Let me give you an example. My first show with the Big Apple Circus as a director, everything was going to be Hollywood themed. So I knew some of the core artists, and Christian Stoinev, he's a doll, and his whole family. Oh, beautiful people. Anyway, Christian was 13.
Oh my God.
And he was doing his hand balancing out with Scooby, his little chihuahua. And I said, okay, we're going to do Home Alone with you, and because we have Greg and Karen DeSanto, clowns, and we're going to all the funny stuff that happens before, and we're going to Christmas theme, and so the Christmas tree pulled up out of the ground, and there was all these nice little things. I said, and you are going to find this costume, this top hat, and Scooby's going to be in a gift box. It's going to come out. And so we worked on that for 9 months before we ever got to rehearsal.
Okay.
That was going, and I had seen the videos, and I knew what his act was, but I was then asking him and his family to change the focus of the act because it had just been a standalone hand balancing act. I said, yeah, but we're going to tie it in to story so that it's going to come out of a musical segue, and the clowns are going to come in and then and they're going to see you, and there's going to be a chase and all this nonsense before you've defeated them, and they're now gone, but you are home alone, and you turn on the Christmas music and then you see the box move. And
I guess my question is if Christian, instead of being a hand balancer, was a straps artist at 13, would it have mattered for the story?
No, it would have adapted whatever his apparatus was, because I knew what the artists were. So I would look at, okay, I've got Christian hand balancer, I've got acrobats here, I've got a strap artist here, strap artist, Peter Pan, Mr. Asanoff. Well, how old was he? Young chap in his early 20s, beautiful performer. Immediately bought into it. Some of the Russian bar act that we had, I needed to see who the acts were, even if I wasn't going to meet them in person until rehearsals.
Yeah.
A year out, I had to start communicating with them. Here's what I've been planning. Here's how I see you fitting into that. How would you feel if we did this? Again, collaboration. But our music, we always used to say, okay, would you consider, here's something by the same composer that might fit this. It's give and take, always. And it's being sensitive to, first of all, a lifetime of training, the rigors of being on the road and with any kind of show, the ability to have time prior to the rehearsal period, having a rehearsal period, because those are rare things, I think.
Yeah.
I'm very lucky to have that.
For sure.
When you're hitting it on the fly and you've got 2 minutes, to meet with somebody, can you reduce it down to a Reader's Digest version and say, nice to meet you. Do you mind if we did this and did this? That's much harder. We're all defensive about our work. We don't want somebody who we don't know.
Right.
There's a short, bald guy coming in here telling me I got to use this music. It comes back to the word respect. We must respect the art, the craft, each other, what we do. We have to, and earn that respect.
You talked a little bit about directing or performing for an American audience and how they are. Have you ever had much experience directing and performing for Europeans?
Yeah, yes. Audiences are taught how to behave. The first time I saw a circus Roncalli, I wept. It was so beautiful. And the artists greet you when you go in, and at the end of it, you sit and you have wine and you talk about the show or them. There is a familial feel. You believe you're part of their family when you're there. That when we sort of do the slapdash, thanks for coming along, step in and see the big show, thanks for coming, and get the next group in, because the matinee's got to get out and the evening people got to get in. You miss all of that ambiance and care to detail, which is too bad. But audiences have a different appreciation for what they're seeing, and boy, if you're lucky enough to play there or be in a situation where you feel that, take advantage of it and remember it, because it's a rare commodity.
That was part 1 of my interview with Steve Smith. I had such a great time interviewing Steve. We had so much fun. I know you heard partway through the interview, there was like this wah wah sound. He had this, little machine that had all these sound effects on it. And he had it on standby in various parts during this part of the interview and the second part. He would hit a button and it was so cool. I feel like I need to get one for the podcast all the time. But a couple of points I wanted to discuss or go over. The first was Steve's decision to leave Ringling Brothers and attend the Goodman School of Theater, which is now DePaul University, and get a BFA. Steve said he did this because he knew that there was something he didn't know about his chosen art form. And rather than continue down the same path and keep clowning, he diversified his creative assets. Acting work, he says, informs his clowning work, and vice versa. And I think we can all take this idea of cross-training creatively. You always hear that maybe as an aerialist, you should do some handstands to help your pushing muscles, or if you're a hand balancer, you should hang to help your hanging muscles. But I also think that if you're a creative artist, it helps to diversify. It helps to say, okay, well, I'm a very, very good dancer, but how do I tell a story? Or I'm a super cerebral playwright. How can I incorporate a movement practice to enhance or diversify what I want to say? Creative cross-training leads to a greater capacity for expression and also keeps you from falling back on tired cliches. And that will help you stand out as an artist because you're making signature work that nobody else could possibly make. Another great point that I gleaned from this interview was the demands of being a circus director. Steve emphasizes that as a director, you have to know everything from the rigging of how each individual apparatus works to the family dynamics of your performers. And it's not only about the performers. Steve talks about how he worked very closely with the running crew, those who set up and tore down the tent every night, and even the musical director. A director brings all of these elements together to make a show that everyone involved is proud of. But Steve's greatest emphasis was on safety. He says, if you undertake the task of becoming a director, know that it is deeply collaborative work and demands that you listen to the needs of your artists. Next week on the podcast, I have part 2 of my interview with Steve. Patreons, if you want to listen to part 2, you can do it right now. It's available on your personal feed at patreon.com/theartistathlete. For training tips and information about me, or to contact me directly, you can follow me on Instagram at @the_artist_athlete, on Facebook at @theartistathlete, and on my website, theartistathlete.com. Also, if you subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating and review on whatever platform you listen on, it helps the podcast become noticeable to more people. So go ahead and do that. And that's it for me, friends, fans, and enemies. Talk at you next week. The Artist Athlete Podcast is supported solely by donations from people like you. Here's what some of those people have to say.
Hey there, friends, fans, and enemies. This is Chris Alston, Patreon of the Artist Athlete Podcast. Straps artist and lyra performer and acrobat out of Greenville, South Carolina. So, if you're ever passing through, make sure to stop in and see me and my friends. We have a wonderful space, and we'd love to see you.